welcome to Geo College Radio. I'm Miles King, joined by my co-host, Jordan Lunderman. How's your day been, Jordan?
It's been pretty good, Miles. I've had a good day. How about you?
It's been a busy day, but it's nice to get into the studio and relive some of the action of this weekend in college football. Note to all our listeners, we're trying something new this week. We understand that some people may not be able to fit an entire hour-long podcast into your day, so we're decided to break it down into 3 sections this week: the review of the last week, a preview of next week, and then lastly, our listener questions. They'll each be about 20 minutes in length, so if you have a little bit of free time here but not an hour, you've got time to listen to it but not feel obligated to fit the whole thing in. Something new we're trying, and we're excited about it, so without further ado, let's kick off this week's action with one of the most exciting games of the week: Arkansas versus Alcorn State.
That it was, Miles. Arkansas versus Alcorn State's always a fun game to watch. 2 great teams. I'm kidding, of course. This is a horrible game. It was great if you're an Arkansas fan, but poor Alcorn State. They did get probably a big paycheck to come and let us whoop their butts, but this one was never close. A great defensive showing. We had 4 turnovers created, which I think that's going to give a big boost going into Alabama week. And then, of course, Austin Allen staying consistent, 13 of 18. We didn't need to use him a whole lot because the running game was going so well, but he was 13 of 18, 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, mistake-free. He's been very good at that this year. And then we have our freshman phenom, Devois Whaley, who ran for over 100 yards, along with our returning sophomore, Raleigh Williams. Like I said, both of them go over 100 yards, and our team rushes for 353 yards. So a great showing from both of them. Really positive going into Alabama week, and I think they're ready to take this challenge. It's a good chance for Bielema to get a statement win, and it's nice that our look-ahead game was against Alcorn State, so it didn't really seem like there was a chance we would slip up even if we were looking ahead. But like I said, this one wasn't close. With a final score of 52-10, there weren't a whole lot of moments where I was scared that they were going to make it a game. Aside from right before halftime, it was 24-7, and they drove all the way down to our 1-yard line and then fumbled the ball, and we recovered it. So it was a great game overall from the Razorbacks, and I think they're ready to take on the biggest challenge of the season in the Crimson Tide.
Yeah, you texted me early in the game, and were talking about how they were driving at the end, but obviously those concerns were allayed by the end of the game, and the Hogs end up with a walloping 52-10, a 42-point victory the week before they play Alabama. So not much more you could hope from in the tune-up game right there. Let's move on to the next game, where history was made for the first time since the year of my birth. 1997, the Oklahoma State Cowboys defeat the Texas Longhorns 49-31 in what was really an exciting matchup.
Yeah, I had trouble watching the Arkansas game at times. These games were happening at the same time, and so I was flipping back and forth, and there were times I missed the touchdown pass from Allen to LaMichael Petway because I was stuck watching the Oklahoma State game. It was just a great game. A ton of drama in that game. Until the very end, you really didn't know who was going to pull out the victory. But yeah, Oklahoma State pulls away with a convincing victory of 18 points. And again, their offense showed a lot of flashes. Like I said last week, Justice Hill is the real deal. He's far ahead of any of the running backs in recent history, at least since Joseph Randall. But I will add a side note to that. Justice Hill's grandmother came to my mom's garage sale this weekend, and she might be a new fan of the podcast, Miles. So,
all right, well, we'll talk to Justice's grandmother, work on getting Justice on here, a friend of the pod for sure, I bet.
Absolutely.
But yeah, absolutely, it was really a thrilling game in the first half. Lots of points being put up. It was like a Wild West shootout. Ended the second quarter 37-25. You might, if you were to just look at that score, you would think that's quite odd, and you would be correct, because Oklahoma State blocked 3 consecutive Texas extra points in one of the most bizarre and incredible special teams performances I've ever seen from the Cowboys. Vincent Taylor collected 2 blocks and one amazing play where he blocked it, scoops it up, and then realizes that he's 300 pounds and isn't beating everybody down the field, so he executes a perfect pitch to Trey Flowers, who takes it in for the 2 points. Darian Daniels, Sugarloaf Darian Daniels, also picks up a block. And I got to tell you, whenever Texas attempted a field goal at the end of the second quarter, the stadium was rocking. That was probably one of the loudest times I've heard Boone Pickens Stadium for a field goal, no less. And then guess what? The Texas kicker ends up hooking it wide left. Cowboy special teams were definitely getting in their heads. But overall, a very good performance from OSU. Mason Rudolph had a very composed game, 19 of 28 for 392 yards. Looked like he was on his way to maybe challenging for the school record again by throwing for 310 yards in the first half. But in the second half, they really controlled the game, pounded the ball with Justice Hill, recording a second straight 100-plus yard game. Very mistake-free game by both offenses, really. Only one interception, and it was costly by Shane Buechele when they were backed up at their own goal line. Telegraphed the pass, and Jordan Stearns intercepted it. Almost takes it back for the pick six, tackled up and one. But really, it didn't really get too close in the second half. The Cowboy defense really shut down the Longhorns. Glenn Spencer made some excellent second-half adjustments. The Longhorns scored. It was either on their first or second possession, but they score a touchdown. They go for two because obviously they can't make a PAT, and they get stuffed, so they only score 6 points in the second half. Glenn Spencer deserves a lot of credit for that, and the Cowboys go on to seal the victory. Now on to our third game of the day. In a shocking result from Tallahassee, the North Carolina Tar Heels beat the Florida State Seminoles 37-35 on a game-winning, last-second 54-yard field goal. After the field goal kicker made the kick, he goes down the field doing the tomahawk chop right in front of the Florida State fans. What did you make of this game result, Jordan?
Well, Miles, I'm frustrated with myself right now because I remember earlier on the podcast I was talking about, in a different episode, I was talking about how a lot of these teams are probably going to have to lose to North Carolina for somebody to rise above. And this is a great chance with Florida State already having a loss. I should have had the foresight to say North Carolina is probably going to have a good chance to upset them, but I didn't have the guts to pick that game, and of course I was wrong. But getting back to the game itself, Florida State went down early, and they just weren't able to recover. They're not built like a team that can stage big fourth-quarter comebacks like Tennessee or TCU. They eventually did take a 1-point lead, but of course, like you said, Nick Weiler comes in, proved to be clutch for North Carolina, and like you said again, runs around doing the tomahawk chop, just getting into the heads of those fans, and then, of course, getting dogpiled in the end zone. This is a great game to watch. And North Carolina had it early, but Florida State, props to them for making it a game in the end. But you have to learn how to finish games, and that's going to bite them in the butt pretty bad.
Yeah, and you thought Florida State would have had it won. They scored with 30-something seconds left in the game on a great play from Francois. He evaded one tackler in the backfield. I think the guy just jumped over him, and Francois ducked and then dives to the end zone and scores.
And fumbles it in the end zone, too. It was ruled that it wasn't a fumble, but he fumbled it in the end zone, and his team immediately recovered. So it wouldn't have mattered, but he did lose control at the end.
Yeah, it was a great individual effort on that, of course, overshadowed by the field goal right after it. But if you're looking at the stats, it looks pretty even, but there are two things that stand out. One, North Carolina goes 9 of 13 on third downs, incredibly efficient, taking care of business. And then, two, Florida State had 13 penalties for 120 yards, over a football field's worth of penalties. And they never turned the ball over. Really a clean game by both teams. North Carolina turned the ball over once on a fumble, but that key number, 120 yards in penalties, those players better be running some extra sprints this week at practice to make up for that, because you're probably looking at the reason they lost this ball game right there.
I have to agree with you. All the penalties really, and they were costly penalties just based on timing. And that can really destroy your chances to win. If you have a lot of penalties, but they're really not affecting you a whole lot, it can be remedied. But some of these penalties were just too bad and too big and just got in the Florida State players' heads. They couldn't do anything right on Saturday.
Yep. Now let's move on to what I would consider the most shocking result of the weekend. Not in the fact that any particular team won, but by the margin of victory. The Washington Huskies defeats the Stanford Cardinal 44-6. A 38-point demolition of the Cardinals, a deforestation, if you will. But this, I mean, I could have, if you would have told me Washington would have won, I would have been impressed. But nobody could have seen this coming. Just a complete and utter domination.
Yeah, it was tough. Based on the competition that Washington has played thus far, there's no real way that you could say they would take it to Stanford like that. But yeah, this game was completely shocking to everyone. The whole nation, Washington is now put up there with the upper tier teams, and they don't have the brand for it, but they're getting up there because of the teams that they've played and the dominating fashion that they've won. But like I said, we didn't know a lot going into that game, but Washington's defense clearly is doing something right, and their offense as well. If you can hold a team like Stanford to just 6 points and then score 44 against a team like Stanford who's known for defense, they're controlling their destiny to the playoff at this point.
Yeah, and it was complete. Yeah, let's not just say that the Huskies got lucky and Stanford just made a bunch of mistakes. The Washington manhandled Stanford in this game. Stanford's bread and butter, running the football, power I formation football with Christian McCaffrey, 29 rushes, 30 yards.
Wow.
They barely averaged over a yard per carry. Really, they only averaged a yard per carry, which is just incredible because they have some big guys who are able to block on that line.
And then you have a guy like Myles Gaskins, the running back for Washington, who had a phenomenal game. It looked like Christian McCaffrey was playing for Washington and some nobody was playing for Stanford.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to look at the total yards tells you the story. Washington with 424 and Stanford with 213. And, of course, only 30 of those on the ground. I was not being able to comprehend this as I was watching it. I couldn't understand what was happening because you would never expect to see the Stanford Cardinal, known for power, smash football, just get manhandled like this. And you texted me this stat right before the game. Christian McCaffrey, still after this game, of course, has never scored a touchdown in a true road game.
He's never rushed or received a touchdown. He has thrown a touchdown pass.
Thrown for a touchdown, but
the least likely.
That is an amazing stat for a guy that's contending for a Heisman Trophy. You got to start to wonder now: is there something that just gets him being on the road, or if he just really loves playing at the farm?
Well, and that only applies to true road games because we saw what he did to Iowa in the Rose Bowl. But yeah, I guess going into somebody else's hometown really messes with him. I can't imagine what that is with him being such a great player. Yeah, there's nothing that was going to stop Jake Browning and company. He did a phenomenal job distributing the ball around, being a little bit more than a game manager. He made plays, but he was able to manage the game well, and he deserves to be on some quarterback watch lists because he's played very well, been very effective and efficient so far.
Yeah, great game by him and a great win by the Huskies. They control their destiny from here on out. Let's move on to a game. The excitement level for this game, right up there with Arkansas versus Alcorn State. The Michigan Wolverines beat Wisconsin 14-7, and what you can obviously tell was an exhilarating matchup. I'm just kidding. It was obviously dreadful to watch and no offensive ability whatsoever. But what do you make of this? This is your Final Four pick, the Michigan Wolverines.
Yeah, I would not say no offensive ability. I think you could just highlight how incredible these two defenses are. Obviously, you've seen Wisconsin shut down Leonard Fournette. You've seen them shut down the Michigan State offense. I mean, they've played great teams and shut them down. So I didn't expect Michigan, who is one of the higher scoring teams in the country, I didn't expect Michigan to come in and for this to be a high scoring game. I expected it to be low scoring, maybe a little bit more exciting than this. But I'm proud of Michigan. They're still proving to me that they deserve a top 4 spot, and I think they'll get it this year after they beat Ohio State in the shoe.
Oh, bold prediction.
I'm calling it now.
Going down in week 5.
Yeah, it's a way too early prediction. The college football playoff rankings haven't even come out. But I think they'll see the value that I see in the Wolverines. And of course, if both teams are undefeated going into that game, it's pretty much a play-in game into the playoff. And then, of course, they have the Big Ten championship. But I'm sure whichever team wins that game will be in the playoff. But, I mean, it's not a surprise to me that this game was a low-scoring game. Like I said, both teams have incredible defenses. And Michigan just has a star in Jabril Peppers, who is really able to impact the game. He being an undersized linebacker, but he does play that position, playing Sam linebacker. And so, I mean, I didn't expect a whole lot different. I know there are a lot of people that wanted to see a better game since it's a top 10 matchup, but that's just how these two teams are built.
Yeah, definitely a hard-fought victory by Michigan. And like you mentioned, both top-quality defenses. The Wisconsin offense wasn't doing much on their own. They only had 159 yards of total offense, and they had 3 fumbles. So you got to give props to their defense for holding up, even though their offense wasn't helping them out at all.
And how about Jordan Lewis with that one-handed interception?
He would have been better served if he had just knocked it down, since it was 4th down. But
it was much.
Just put it on the highlight reel, young man.
Yeah, with that much time in the game, I say you can go ahead and do that. You're going to take a knee to wind the clock out, so you can have your moment. That'll definitely be on the NFL Scouts highlight reel.
Yeah, and all the recruiting material as well. So probably served them better in the long run. Let's move on to actually one of the most exciting games of the weekend, and a insane, incredible finish. The Tennessee Volunteers topped the Georgia Bulldogs 34-31 on a last-second Hail Mary. What was your reaction to seeing this, Jordan?
Well, Miles, to be perfectly honest, as I was watching this game and Georgia scored that touchdown, I thought Tennessee could definitely do something here. I thought that they had time, and with how they played this year, I was like, they would be the team that does something here. Sort of sarcastically, but at the same time, there's a hint of truth to what I was saying there. And of course, that ended up happening. I wouldn't have claimed that in a public setting, but I did think it to myself that they can do something here. And of course, that's what happened with a crazy Hail Mary. I mean, I was speechless just watching that game. I had no idea what to think. But Tennessee proved again that they are the luckiest team in the country by a long shot. They're like the Auburn team in 2013 with Nick Marshall. Whenever you have, of course, the kick six, where the field goal's taken back 109 yards for a touchdown. Chris Davis returns it. And then you have that pass against Georgia that's tipped off of the defender's hands, caught, and then run for a touchdown. So Tennessee has already hit their cap of lucky plays for the year. I think their time's expired, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I guess you can't take a whole lot away from this team because they have won the games, but they really don't deserve to be undefeated. Everything's gone their way, and eventually the law of averages is going to come up, and it's going to bite them. It's going to bite them in the butt. And I mean, this week we'll get to see a great team play against them that's not mistake prone. I don't know. Tennessee just doesn't look like the number 9 team in the country, and I think that'll be reflected in the college football playoff committees and their evaluation of the Volunteers, because the eye test is important, whether we want to say it or not. The eye test is very important, especially to a human committee. So on that note, they're failing in all respects.
Yes, sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, but you're definitely living on the knife's edge with all these last-minute victories, with the fumble against Appalachian State that goes into the end zone and is recovered for a touchdown. Easily could have been, if it bounces the wrong way, recovered by Appalachian State. And now you're looking at them with a bad loss. Who knows if they're able to parlay that into any momentum for the future. But for the moment, you've just got to give them the credit for winning these tough games. We'll see if their luck continues or if it runs out. Of course, we'll talk about this in the next podcast, but they've got a tough matchup against A&M coming up this weekend. But Georgia is definitely not having the season they would have hoped under Kirby Smart, with 2 straight losses of varying method, but both heartbreaking, with the blowout to Ole Miss, and now on literally the last play, a Hail Mary against Tennessee. Very disappointing by Georgia. They weren't able to close out this game.
And on that note, they're just way too high expectations for Kirby Smart. They expected him, just because he was such a great defensive coordinator for Alabama, they expected him to come in and take him to the national championship this year, and that's just not realistic. You had quarterback problems last year, and those problems were still going to be the case this year. Your best running back is constantly hurt. Your second best running back is constantly hurt. And so it's too much pressure to put on him to say you're getting to an SEC East title this year. The rule of thumb should always be give him enough years to get the first people that they recruited as seniors, and that's whenever they should be able to produce. And if they aren't producing at that point, you can be upset, but you got to give them 4 years at least.
Yep. So Georgia's going to be disappointed, but hopefully their fans will get a little bit of perspective and have an eye toward the future with him, because obviously coming from the Nick Saban coaching tree, he is a quality coach. He knows his X's and O's. Let's move on to a barn burner in Fort Worth. OU gets back to winning ways in a 52-46 thriller against TCU. Shouldn't have been a thriller. OU was up big in this game. They went on a 42-3 run at one point to look like they were going to put the game just completely out of hand. But they let TCU come back and score 22 points in the fourth quarter to make it a game. And at the end of the day, the Sooners were able to stop TCU on that last drive, but still an impressive display by TCU to be able to come back.
Definitely. And one thing that frustrated me with OU's play calling, they did a great job the entire game until they got ahead and got ahead big. And that's whenever they got too conservative with their play calling. They did things that wouldn't work for anyone just to try and milk the clock. And TCU knew what they were going to do, so they were able to stop them. If they had continued to do what they did all game, of course, they would have put up more points and stretched out that lead even farther. But OU proved this week that they're not going to give up on this season just because they're out of playoff contention. Their 2 games, of course, being against Houston and Ohio State, are out of conference. And so they have as good a chance as anyone to win the Big 12 title this year. And they took an early lead on TCU, like we said, but just like TCU did against Arkansas, they gave up a huge fourth quarter, and that's something you can't do against these great teams. Yeah,
disappointing start to the season by both teams now as TCU drops their second close game of the season. One after being in position to win against Arkansas and having a field goal blocked and losing in double overtime, and now failing to complete this comeback bid. But Kenny Hill had a very impressive game in resurrecting their chances as he threw for 449 yards, going 26-45, only 1 interception, which is impressive when you air the ball out 45 times against a defense as good as OU's.
That 1 interception was a pick 6, though, which proved costly. Yes. It hit him right in stride. It was a perfect pass to the DB.
Yep, it was not just like Buechele to Jordan Stearns.
Yeah.
But OU, they've got to count themselves lucky that they didn't cough this one up at the end. But like you said, they now control their own destiny in the Big 12, and they have as good a chance as anybody to win the title this year. All right, let's move on to the marquee matchup of the week, and the last game we're going to cover this week. The Clemson Tigers win 42-36 in thrilling fashion against the number 3 Louisville Cardinals. And what was a great game required a stop inside the 10-yard line by the Clemson Tigers. A little bit of controversy there, and we'll get to that later. But this game lived up to its billing, and it was really exciting. As a neutral, you couldn't have hoped for anything more.
Absolutely.
Lamar Jackson playing the toughest defense he has so far this year. Still playing incredible. Really, it was quite a sloppy game as there were 8 combined turnovers, 5 by Clemson and 3 by Louisville. But it just contributed to the offensive fireworks being put up from the second quarter on, and just a great game. What you'd expect from a top 5 matchup like this.
Exactly, and like you said, Lamar Jackson is on the losing side of this, and he lost a close one, mostly due to the lack of effort by James Quick, and like you said, we'll get to that. But Lamar really did nothing to hurt his Heisman campaign, and Deshaun actually hurt his Heisman campaign. Lamar had a much better game, and Deshaun's numbers were fantastic other than one stat, and a very costly stat, which was the 3 interceptions that he threw. And that's why nobody's really talking about Deshaun Watson's performance. It's all about Louisville's loss and not Clemson's win. And so I think Lamar might have even positioned himself better. You can be a 1-loss team and still have a Heisman winner. And we've seen even worse with Baylor's quarterback back in the day, Robert Griffin III.
Should have been Brandon Whedon's trophy.
It should have been. But yeah, like I said, had Deshaun Watson not made those mistakes, a lot more people would be talking about his performance.
Yeah, and it really was a great performance. And like you said, Deshaun Watson really started out the game really rusty, making some poor throws, the aforementioned 3 interceptions. It was really feast or famine for this Clemson offense as they scored 28 points in the second quarter and then 14 in the fourth quarter, but were shut out in the first and third quarters. Interesting game in that regards. Let's get to the last play and why there might be some controversy. And you might be wondering, well, what is that? And I will have you know, if you're watching a game on TV and you're looking to the opposite sideline, you see the chain gang. And of course, the chain gang denotes where the first down is. It's set up every 10 yards. But what you don't see on TV is on that near sideline, there are 2 other members of the chain gang. One has one of the orange markers that stands up tall vertically, and he puts that where the original line of scrimmage on first down is. And then the second member places an orange marker where the line to gain is. So 10 yards down the field, you would put it there. And we see, if we're able to see pictures of this after the fact, the official placed the orange marker, the line to gain, on that last play at the 3-yard line instead of the 2-yard line.
Oh, wow.
Of course, the chain gang are not official referees. They're not NCAA. They're usually hired by the university. They might be local refs, high school refs, or something like that. And the man is wearing a Clemson hat and celebrates quite enthusiastically after the play. If you're into conspiracy theories, you might want to look into that. I originally heard about this on the article on SB Nation. That definitely explains why the receiver didn't try to gain any extra yards, because he was looking at the marker and he was already going to make it. Well, it explains why he immediately points for the first down, because the chain gang member places that at the 3-yard line. So it doesn't excuse his lack of awareness to not know that the first down is at the 2-yard line, but you got to have some sympathy because it's going so fast out there. He probably looked up, saw the line to gain, and thought he had it.
Well, and you don't have to know that you started on the 12 and you need to get to the 2. You need to know, okay, I'm running a crossing route, and whenever I get the ball, I'm going to be able to see the line to gain. You would like for him to know for sure the line to gain, but there's no excuse for the chain gang missing that.
Yeah,
that's absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah,
there has to be some sort of investigation into that.
Yeah, because it is obviously not in the right spot. Not in the right spot denoting where it is, but not in the right spot off the field either. Usually those markers are supposed to be about 2 yards off the field, and this is well beyond 3 yards. So in the wrong spot, it's hard to see. You might think that this guy was trying to tilt the game in favor of the Tigers a little bit.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
Yeah, so this continues the trend of officiating mistakes and gaffes costing teams wins and games this year. So we'll be interested to see if there's any repercussions on this sideline chain gang, or what, if anything, can be done about it, because it obviously was a mistake, and who knows whether it was purposeful or not, but we'll see. And on that controversial note, we'll end this segment on the podcast. Remember, we'll have the preview for next week coming up and listener questions later. We are making those separate episodes to make it a little bit easier to listen to. That concludes the review of Week 5. Thank you guys for listening. Be sure you check out episodes 2 and 3 of this week.
They will all be posted back to back, so it'll be impossible to miss them. But make sure, I guess it doesn't matter if you watch them in order, but it would make a little bit more sense if it was in chronological order.
All right, have a good one, guys.
Have a good one.